With just $3,200 saved toward her $5,000 escape fund, Jasmine Shin is counting down the nights until she can disappear from her abusive boyfriend Derek, until a mysterious Korean businessman named Kim Taehyun witnesses her terror and offers her a way out. But when Derek's car explodes that same night, Jasmine realizes Taehyun is no ordinary stranger. At 24, Jasmine balanced the weight of heavy dinner trays with the crushing exhaustion of working double shifts at Metro diners 6 nights a week. She was practical, focused, and knew the exact value of every dollar bill tucked into her secret hiding place behind the loose bathroom tile. Her long black hair was always pulled back in a neat ponytail that emphasized her delicate features, and despite the bone-deep tiredness that had become her constant companion, her dark eyes still held a spark of determination. She was driven by one uncompromising vision: enough money to vanish without a trace, to start over somewhere Derek could never find her. The diner itself was a study in worn-down persistence. Cracked vinyl booths held together with duct tape, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered overhead, and linoleum flooring that had seen better decades. The coffee was bitter, the pie was stale, and the customers were mostly truckers, night shift workers, and people who had nowhere else to go at 2 a.m. It was the kind of place where dreams came to die slowly, one minimum wage hour at a time. But tonight felt different. Table 12 held a single customer who disrupted the diner's usual atmosphere of quiet desperation. He was Korean, late 30s, dressed in a dark charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jasmine made in 3 months. The fabric was impeccable, perfectly tailored, and the way it moved with him suggested custom work from someone who understood expensive clothing. His presence was magnetic and unsettling, sharp features and dark hair styled with precision, eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings with calculated intensity. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, and danger. Kim Taehyun had been watching her for the better part of an hour, not staring, nothing crude or obvious, but observing with the kind of attention that made Jasmine's skin prickle with awareness. He sipped his black coffee slowly, never touched the menu, and seemed completely out of place among the truck drivers and insomniacs who made up Metro Diner's usual clientele. His hands were clean, manicured, with a platinum watch that caught the harsh fluorescent light. When he moved, it was with controlled precision, like a man who never wasted motion. "What can I get you?" Jasmine asked when she finally approached his table, notepad ready and professional smile in place despite her growing unease. "The coffee is sufficient," he replied, his English perfect but carrying just enough accent to confirm his origins. His voice was low, measured, with an undertone that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Jasmine nodded and turned to leave, but his next words stopped her cold. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Excuse me," she said, turning back with confusion clear on her face. His dark eyes held hers with uncomfortable directness. "How long has someone been putting their hands on you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Jasmine's trained response kicked in automatically, the same lie she'd perfected over 8 months of practice. "I don't know what you mean. I'm just tired from working." Kim Taehyun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You're favoring your left side when you walk. There's a bruise on your wrist, partially covered by makeup. Your right shoulder sits higher than your left, suggesting recent impact trauma. These aren't signs of being tired from work." Jasmine felt her carefully constructed facade cracking. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the diner's ambient noise. Before he could answer, the front door chimed with the arrival of another customer. Jasmine's blood turned to ice the moment she saw Derek's familiar silhouette. 6'2", muscular from his construction job, with the kind of smile that looked charming until you knew what hid behind it. He scanned the diner like he owned it, his gaze stopping when it found Jasmine. The transformation in her body language was immediate and unmistakable. Her shoulders hunched protectively, her breathing became shallow, and every muscle tensed like a rabbit sensing a predator. The confident waitress who had been handling customers all night disappeared, replaced by someone trying to make herself invisible. Kim Taehyun noticed everything. The way Jasmine's hands started trembling, how she took an unconscious step backward, the flash of pure terror that crossed her face before she managed to school her features into neutrality. He watched Derek's approach, cataloging the possessive way the man looked at Jasmine, the subtle aggression in his body language, the entitled smile of someone who believed he owned what he was looking at. "Hey baby," Derek said, his voice loud enough to carry across the diner. "Working hard or hardly working?" "Just finishing up," Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the fear radiating from every inch of her body. Her training in survival had taught her to appear calm, to never give Derek ammunition for his anger. Derek's attention shifted to Kim Tae-hyun, taking in the expensive suit and obvious wealth with the kind of suspicion that came from insecurity. "Who's your friend?" he asked, the question directed at Jasmine, but his eyes never leaving the Korean man. "Just a customer," Jasmine said quickly. "I should get back to work." Kim Tae-hyun stood with fluid grace, his movement drawing Derek's full attention. The height difference wasn't significant, but there was something about the way Tae-hyun carried himself that made him seem larger, more imposing. When he spoke, his voice was calm and controlled. "Your girlfriend is an excellent waitress. Very professional." Derek's expression darkened at the implied familiarity. "Yeah, well, Jasmine's got a lot of talents. Don't you, sweetheart?" The possessive edge in his voice made Jasmine flinch visibly. Kim Tae-hyun noted the reaction, filed it away with all the other evidence he'd been collecting. "I should settle my bill," Tae-hyun said, placing a $50 bill on the table for a $5 cup of coffee. "Keep the change." As he prepared to leave, he paused next to Jasmine and spoke in a voice only she could hear. "When you're ready to stop handling things alone, call me." He slipped a business card into her apron pocket, so smoothly Derek never saw the exchange. The card was simple, elegant, expensive. Kim Tae-hyun, with a phone number and nothing else. But written in precise handwriting on the back were words that made her hands shake. "I have experience with men who hurt women. I have resources to make sure they stop permanently." After Tae-hyun left, Derek's mood turned ugly. What did he want? He demanded, his voice low and threatening. "Just ordered coffee," Jasmine said, focusing on cleaning the table to avoid eye contact. "Rich foreign guys don't come to places like this just for coffee. You give him your number." "No, Derek. I would never do that. You know that." Derek grabbed her wrist, his fingers finding the exact spot where old bruises were healing. His grip was just tight enough to cause pain without leaving immediate marks. "Yeah, I know what you would never do. But I also know what you think about doing." The threat hung in the air between them as Derek finally released her wrist and walked toward the exit. "See you at home," he said, the words carrying enough menace to make Jasmine's stomach clench with dread. Alone again, Jasmine touched the business card in her pocket and wondered if Kim Tae-hyun's promise was real or just another kind of trap. 3 days after the encounter at the diner, Derek's suspicion had curdled into something far more dangerous. Jasmine came home from her shift to find him sitting at their kitchen table, her secret stash of escape money spread out in front of him like evidence at a trial. 27 $20 bills, 8 tens, and a handful of 5s and 1s. Her entire future laid bare under the harsh kitchen light. "Where did this come from?" Derek asked, his voice deceptively calm in the way that always preceded violence. Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to calculate her response. "Tips," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I've been saving for us. For a vacation, maybe." Derek's laugh was sharp and ugly. "A vacation. Right. With money you hid from me. Behind the bathroom tile where you thought I'd never look." The discovery meant he'd been watching her, following her movements, studying her habits. The violation felt almost as brutal as his physical attacks. How long had he known about her escape fund? How long had he been playing with her, letting her think she had a chance at freedom? "You planning to leave me, Jasmine?" he asked, standing slowly from the chair. His construction worker frame filled the small kitchen, blocking her path to the door. "No," she said quickly. "I would never leave you, Derek. You know that." "Do I? Because this looks like running money to me. This looks like a woman who thinks she's got somewhere better to be." He moved closer, and Jasmine could smell the beer on his breath, see the dangerous glitter in his eyes that meant his mood was beyond reasoning with. She'd learned to read these signs over 8 months of careful survival, learned to recognize when words would no longer work and violence became inevitable. "Derek, please. Let's just talk about this. We are talking. You're going to tell me who gave you the idea that you could just take off. Was it that foreign guy at the diner?" the one with the fancy suit. The mention of Kim Tae-hyun sent ice through her veins. I told you, he was just a customer. Derek's hand shot out and grabbed her throat, not squeezing hard enough to cut off air, but tight enough to make his point. His other hand held her escape money, crumpling the bills in his fist. Customers don't look at my girlfriend like that. Customers don't leave $50 tips for $5 coffee. And they sure as hell don't give women like you business cards. Jasmine's mind raced. He'd seen the card exchange. He'd been watching more carefully than she'd realized. The business card was still hidden in her work uniform, but if Derek knew about it, nowhere was safe. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Derek's grip tightened slightly. Wrong answer. The beating that followed was methodical and precise. Derek had learned over the months exactly how to cause maximum pain while leaving minimal visible evidence. He focused on her ribs, her back, places that could be hidden under clothing. When he finally stopped, Jasmine was curled on the kitchen floor, gasping for breath and tasting blood. You try to leave me again, Derek said, kneeling beside her. I'll find you. And when I do, this will feel like a love tap. You understand me? Jasmine nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. I'm going out for a while. When I come back, I want this place cleaned up and dinner on the table. And Jasmine, he paused at the door. Find that business card and bring it to me. We're going to have a conversation with your new friend. After Derek left, Jasmine lay on the cold linoleum for a long time, listening to her own ragged breathing and feeling the familiar ache of fresh bruises forming. But this time was different. This time, the beating had revealed something Derek hadn't intended. She was going to die if she stayed. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next week, but eventually his anger would escalate beyond control and she would become another statistic. With trembling hands, she retrieved Kim Tae-hyun's business card from her uniform pocket. The paper felt substantial, expensive, like everything else about the mysterious Korean businessman. His handwritten promise stared back at her. I have resources to make sure they stop permanently. She dialed the number with shaking fingers, half expecting it to go straight to voicemail or disconnect entirely. Instead, Kim Tae-hyun answered on the second ring, his voice calm and alert despite the late hour. Mr. Kim, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This is Jasmine. From the diner. I know who you are. Are you safe right now? The directness of the question caught her off guard. No, she said simply. I'm not safe. Where are you? Home. But he's coming back. He found my money. He knows about your card. He's going to hurt me worse when he returns. There was a pause, and Jasmine could hear what sounded like movement, car doors, low voices speaking in Korean. Text me your address immediately, Kim Tae-hyun said. Lock yourself in the bathroom. Don't open the door for anyone except me. I'll be there in 15 minutes. How will I know it's you? She asked. I'll say your name 3 times. Jasmine, Jasmine, Jasmine. Don't open the door for any other voice. The line went dead. Jasmine sent her address and then barricaded herself in the tiny bathroom, sitting in the bathtub with her knees drawn to her chest. Every sound from the street made her jump. Every car door, every footstep, every voice could be Derek returning to finish what he'd started. Exactly 14 minutes later, she heard the quiet knock and the voice she was waiting for. Jasmine, Jasmine, Jasmine. She opened the door to find Kim Tae-hyun standing in her hallway, no longer wearing the expensive suit from the diner. Instead, he was dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb light, and he moved with the fluid efficiency of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. Behind him, 2 other Korean men stood guard, their attention focused on the street outside. We need to leave now, Tae-hyun said, taking in her battered appearance with professional assessment. Can you walk? Yes, she said, though moving sent sharp pains through her ribs. Take only what you absolutely need. 1 bag. We have 3 minutes before this location becomes unsafe. Jasmine grabbed her work uniforms, the few photographs of her dead parents, and the small amount of cash Derek hadn't found. Everything else she left behind, including 8 months of careful planning and hopeful dreaming. In the car, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, Kim Tae-hyun made a series of phone calls in rapid Korean while one of his associates drove through the city with practiced expertise. Jasmine caught fragments of conversation, the tone urgent but controlled. When he finished the calls, he turned his attention to her injuries. We're taking you to a private medical facility, he said. Dr. Park is discreet, and will ask no questions. After that, you'll stay at one of my properties until the situation is resolved." "What situation?" Jasmine asked, though part of her already knew. "Derek," Taehyun said simply. "He will no longer be a problem after tonight." "What does that mean?" Kim Taehyun's dark eyes met hers in the dim light of the car. "It means you're under my protection now, and I protect what's mine permanently." The medical clinic was nothing like the emergency rooms Jasmine had imagined during Derek's worst beatings. Instead, it was quiet, efficient, and felt more like an upscale spa than a hospital. Dr. Park was a middle-aged Korean woman who examined Jasmine's injuries with gentle competence, asking no questions about their origin while providing thorough care. 2 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, mild concussion, Dr. Park reported to Kim Taehyun. Nothing life-threatening, but she needs rest and proper pain management. No strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. While Jasmine received treatment, Kim Taehyun made more phone calls. She couldn't understand the Korean, but his tone grew progressively colder as the conversations continued. When Dr. Park finished, he helped Jasmine into the car for the drive to what he called a safe house. The penthouse apartment overlooked the city from the 43rd floor of an exclusive building. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of lights stretching to the horizon. The furniture was modern, expensive, and somehow managed to be both luxurious and comfortable. Everything was clean, ordered, and spoke of wealth that existed beyond normal comprehension. "You'll stay here until other arrangements can be made," Kim Taehyun said, showing her to a bedroom larger than her entire previous apartment. "The refrigerator is stocked, there are clothes in the closet that should fit you, and this phone will reach me directly if you need anything." Jasmine sank onto the bed, feeling the weight of the night's events settling into her bones. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll discuss your future." At 3:17 a.m., Derek's car exploded in the parking lot of his favorite bar. The blast was loud enough to wake half the neighborhood and bright enough to be seen from several blocks away. The official cause would be listed as a fuel line leak combined with electrical failure, a tragic accident that claimed the life of Derek Morrison, age 28, construction worker and devoted boyfriend. Kim Taehyun received the confirmation call while sitting in his own penthouse across the city, watching Jasmine sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The problem had been solved with the efficiency his organization was known for. Derek would never hurt another woman. Jasmine was free. But freedom, Kim Taehyun reflected as he poured himself a glass of aged whiskey, always came with a price. And Jasmine Chun had just become very, very valuable to him. Jasmine woke in the penthouse to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar sensation of feeling completely safe. Her ribs still ached with every breath, but the bone-deep exhaustion that had been her constant companion for 8 months was finally beginning to ease. The bedroom was larger than her entire previous apartment, decorated in soft grays and whites with furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year. The clothes Kim Taehyun had mentioned were indeed in the walk-in closet, still bearing department store tags in exactly her size. Expensive brands she recognized from magazine advertisements, but had never imagined wearing. Silk blouses, tailored slacks, cashmere sweaters, everything in tasteful colors and perfect fits that suggested someone had done considerable research into her measurements and preferences. After showering in a bathroom that felt more like a spa, Jasmine found Kim Taehyun in the kitchen, dressed in another impeccably tailored suit, and reading financial reports while drinking coffee from a cup that probably cost more than her old weekly grocery budget. He looked up as she entered, his dark eyes conducting a quick assessment of her physical condition. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting aside his papers with practiced attention. "Better." Confused, but better. She poured herself coffee from the expensive machine, noting how even this simple domestic ritual felt different in surroundings of such luxury. Confusion is understandable. Your life changed dramatically in a very short time. Jasmine settled across from him at the marble breakfast bar, acutely aware of how the morning light illuminated the vast difference in their circumstances. "You killed him, didn't you?" Kim Taehyun's expression remained steady, neither confirming nor denying. "Derek Morrison died in an automobile accident. These things happen to men who make poor choices." The careful phrasing told her everything she needed to know. Kim Taehyun was not a man who left threats unresolved or problems partially addressed. When he promised permanent solutions, he delivered exactly that. "What happens to me now?" she asked, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee cup to stop them from trembling. "That depends on what you want to happen. You have choices now that you didn't have before." "Such as?" Kim Tae-hyun leaned back slightly, his posture remaining relaxed despite the weight of the conversation. "You could disappear entirely. New identity, relocation to another city, enough money to start fresh wherever you choose. Complete freedom with no strings attached. And the other option, you could work for me." The offer hung in the air between them while Jasmine tried to process what he was suggesting. "Work for you doing what?" "I need someone I can trust completely. Someone with integrity, intelligence, and the ability to handle sensitive information with absolute discretion. Based on my observations, you possess all of these qualities." "I'm a waitress," Jasmine said. "I pour coffee and serve pie. I don't know anything about business or whatever it is you actually do. What I actually do is manage various enterprises across the city. Some are conventional businesses, real estate development, import operations, private security consulting. Others exist in areas where conventional law enforcement is inadequate or unwilling to act. You're talking about crime. I'm talking about justice. There's a difference, though not everyone recognizes it." Kim Tae-hyun stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the city skyline. "Yesterday you were trapped by a man who would have eventually killed you. Today that man is dead and you're sitting in safety, wearing clothes that fit perfectly, drinking coffee that costs more per pound than you made in tips each week. Which situation represents justice?" Jasmine couldn't argue with his logic, even as it disturbed her moral certainties. "What exactly would this job entail?" "Personal assistant. Administrative support. Managing my calendar, handling correspondence, coordinating with various business associates. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, nothing that would compromise your safety or integrity." He returned to the breakfast bar and sat down, his attention fully focused on her face. "The compensation would be $150,000 annually, paid monthly into an account established solely in your name. Full medical and dental coverage through private providers. A furnished apartment in a secure building with 24-hour concierge service. Additional benefits include educational opportunities if you choose to pursue them." The numbers were staggering. More money than Jasmine had ever imagined having. Enough to transform not just her life, but potentially the lives of everyone she cared about. "What do you expect in return?" "Absolute loyalty. Complete discretion regarding all business matters. Availability during normal business hours plus occasional evening events. Professional appearance and conduct at all times." His voice took on a harder edge as he continued. "Most importantly, silence. What you see, what you hear, what you learn in my employ stays confidential permanently. Violations of this trust would have severe consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Kim Tae-hyun's dark eyes held hers without blinking. "The kind that ensure the violation never happens again." The threat was delivered calmly, matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine as she fully grasped what she was being offered. A golden cage in exchange for her old iron one. "This isn't really a choice, is it?" she said quietly. "You're not going to let me just walk away and start over somewhere else." "Of course I would. Your freedom was purchased with Derek's death. That debt is already paid in full." Kim Tae-hyun's expression softened slightly. "But I think you're intelligent enough to recognize a good opportunity when you see one." Jasmine looked around the luxurious penthouse, then down at her expensive clothes, then back at the man who could apparently solve problems with phone calls and eliminate threats overnight. He was right. She did recognize an opportunity, even if it came with strings attached. "What if I say no? Then I arrange your new identity and relocation. You disappear completely and safely. We never see each other again. And if I say yes, then you become part of my organization, protected, provided for, and valued for your contributions. The choice is yours, but I need an answer today." Jasmine stared into her coffee cup, watching steam rise from the dark surface while her mind raced through implications and possibilities. 6 months ago, she'd been planning to escape with $5,000 and no real plan beyond getting away from Derek. Now she was being offered financial security, safety, and purpose by a man who had already proven he could deliver on his promises. The moral implications troubled her. Working for Kim Tae-hyun meant accepting his methods, becoming complicit in whatever justice meant in his world. But the alternative was starting over with nothing, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if the next Derek was waiting around some corner. "You said nothing illegal," she said finally. "Nothing that would implicate you legally. My business practices exist in gray areas that conventional law doesn't address effectively. And nothing dangerous. You would be safer working for me than you would be walking the streets of any city in America." Jasmine took a deep breath, tasting the expensive coffee and feeling the soft cashmere of her borrowed clothes against her skin. She thought of 8 months of counting tips and hiding money and planning escape routes. She thought of Derek's hands around her throat and his promises to find her anywhere she ran. This man had eliminated all of that with a phone call. He was offering her protection, purpose, and prosperity beyond anything she'd ever imagined. The price was loyalty and silence about things she probably didn't want to know anyway. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and steady. Kim Tae-hyun smiled for the first time since she'd met him, an expression that transformed his sharp features and made him look genuinely pleased. "Excellent. We'll formalize the arrangement this afternoon." He stood and retrieved a sleek black phone from the counter, placing it in front of her like a symbolic key to her new life. "This connects directly to my personal line. Use it whenever you need anything. Your apartment will be ready tomorrow, along with your first month's advance and complete orientation materials." Jasmine picked up the phone, feeling its substantial weight in her palm. Such a small object to represent such a massive change in her circumstances. "What have I gotten myself into?" she wondered aloud. Kim Tae-hyun's smile widened slightly. "Something much better than what you left behind. Trust me, Jasmine Chun. I take very good care of what belongs to me." 3 months after signing her employment contract, Jasmine Chun had adapted to luxury with surprising ease. Her corner office on the 38th floor of the Kim Holdings building overlooked the financial district through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Her desk was mahogany, her computer state-of-the-art, and her wardrobe now consisted entirely of designer pieces that fit her perfectly and made her feel both professional and elegant. The work itself had proven more engaging than she'd anticipated. Managing Kim Tae-hyun's schedule required diplomatic skills she hadn't known she possessed, coordinating between legitimate business meetings and what he diplomatically called private consultations. She'd learned to recognize the difference between his regular business associates, who arrived in expensive suits and spoke of profit margins, and his other contacts, who dressed more practically and discussed matters in careful euphemisms. Tae-hyun himself had been a revelation. The cold, controlled man she'd met at the diner existed only in specific contexts. Around her, he revealed glimpses of unexpected gentleness. He remembered that she preferred her coffee with cream and sugar, even though he drank his black. He'd noticed she favored blue clothing and ensured her office wardrobe reflected that preference. When late meetings kept her working past normal hours, he arranged for dinner to be delivered from restaurants she'd never imagined eating at. This evening was one of those late nights. Jasmine was organizing contracts for a real estate acquisition when Tae-hyun emerged from his private office, loosening his tie with the controlled precision that marked all his movements. The gesture was more casual than she'd ever seen from him, and it humanized him in a way that made her suddenly conscious of how attractive he was when he wasn't maintaining his corporate mask. "You should go home," he said, glancing at the clock that read nearly 9 p.m. "The contracts can wait until tomorrow." "I'm almost finished," Jasmine replied, though she was indeed tired. "The Riverside project is time-sensitive, and I wanted to ensure everything was organized for your morning review." Tae-hyun moved to stand beside her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that had become associated in her mind with safety and competence. "Let me see." He leaned over to examine her work, and Jasmine found herself acutely aware of his proximity. Over 3 months, she developed what she tried to tell herself was professional admiration for his intelligence and efficiency. But sitting in her apartment alone each evening, she'd begun to admit that her feelings had evolved beyond mere gratitude or professional respect. "This is excellent work," he said, straightening. "Your organizational skills have proven invaluable. I don't think I properly appreciated what I was gaining when I offered you this position." The compliment warmed her in a way that felt dangerous. Thank you, Mr. Kim. I've enjoyed learning about your business operations. Taehyun's expression shifted slightly, becoming less formal. When we're working late like this, you can call me Taehyun. The formality seems excessive for two people sharing takeout Chinese food. As if summoned by his words, the evening's dinner arrived. Elegant containers from an upscale restaurant that specialized in Korean fusion cuisine. Taehyun had made a habit of ordering enough for both of them during late work sessions, turning her office into an impromptu dining room where they discussed everything from market trends to her observations about American business culture. Tonight felt different, though, more intimate. Maybe it was the lateness of the hour, or the way the city lights created a cocoon of warmth around her office, or simply the accumulated weight of 3 months of careful conversation and growing trust. Jasmine, Taehyun said as they shared bulgogi and sophisticated interpretations of comfort food, may I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret accepting my offer? Do you miss your old life? The question surprised her with its directness. She set down her chopsticks and considered her response carefully. I miss the simplicity sometimes, knowing exactly where I stood, even if where I stood was precarious. And now I'm still figuring out where I stand. But I don't regret the choice. I've never felt safer or more capable than I do working for you. Taehyun nodded, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features. Safety is important. I learned that lesson too late to help someone who mattered to me. His tone had shifted, becoming more personal than she'd ever heard from him. Jasmine recognized an opening into the private thoughts of a man who kept himself carefully controlled at all times. What do you mean? She asked gently. I had a younger sister, Minji, 5 years younger than me. Everything bright and good in a family that had seen considerable darkness. Taehyun stood and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass as he stared out at the city below. When he continued, his voice carried a weight of old pain that made Jasmine's chest ache in sympathy. When I was building my business, expanding operations, establishing territories, I was completely focused on success. Power and profit consumed all my attention. Minji was in college, studying art, living what I thought was a safe, normal life. He paused, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that spoke of rigid control over difficult emotions. She met a man, American, charming, from a good family. He seemed perfect for her, everything our parents would have wanted. I was too busy to pay attention to the details of her relationship, too focused on my own concerns to notice when her calls became less frequent, when her visits home grew shorter, when she started making excuses for bruises and explaining away changes in her behavior. Jasmine felt cold understanding wash over her. The parallels to her own situation were unmistakable, except in Taehyun's story. No one had been watching carefully enough to intervene. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He'd isolated her from everyone who could help. She was afraid to ask for help, convinced that his violence was somehow her fault. One night, he went too far. The police said it was domestic violence escalating to homicide, a tragic but common occurrence. Taehyun's reflection in the window showed a man grappling with guilt and rage that had never fully healed. I could have prevented it. I had resources, connections, the ability to remove threats permanently. But I was too focused on business expansion to notice my sister was dying by degrees. The revelation explained so much about his immediate recognition of her situation, his swift and decisive action against Derek, his insistence on permanent solutions to dangerous problems. He wasn't just protecting her. He was trying to save someone he'd failed to save before. That's why you helped me, she said softly. Because you saw her in my situation. Taehyun turned from the window, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Partially, but also because you impressed me with your strength. Minji was gentle, trusting, unprepared for real cruelty. You were different. You'd been surviving and planning and fighting back within the constraints of an impossible situation. You reminded me that some people are worth saving not just because they need help, but because they deserve better than what they've been given. The vulnerability in his admission created an intimacy between them that felt profound and slightly dangerous. Jasmine realized she was seeing the man behind the controlled businessman, the brother who carried guilt alongside power, the protector who had learned too late that some things mattered more than profit margins. I'm sorry about your sister, she said, meaning it completely. She must have been very special to be so loved. She was. And I've spent the last 3 years ensuring that no woman under my protection will suffer the same fate. The phrase under my protection resonated with implications that Jasmine was only beginning to understand. She wasn't just his employee. She was someone he had claimed responsibility for in the most fundamental way possible. The realization should have been frightening, but instead it felt like coming home to safety she'd never experienced before. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sharp buzz of Taehyun's security phone. He answered with his usual efficiency, but his expression grew progressively darker as he listened to the voice on the other end. When he asked tersely, "How many? Are you certain?" After hanging up, he turned to Jasmine with an expression that reminded her powerfully of the dangerous man she'd first encountered at the diner. "We have a problem," he said. Derek had associates who've recently discovered that his death wasn't accidental. They've identified you as the reason for their friend's elimination, and they've decided that revenge is appropriate. Jasmine felt her newfound sense of security crumble as fear rushed back into her chest. What kind of associates? The kind who believe violence solves problems and women are acceptable targets for their anger. They've been watching you for the past week, learning your routines, planning their approach. How do you know this? Because my people are watching them watch you. And tonight they made their move. They attempted to enter your apartment building an hour ago. The words hit like physical blows. While she'd been sitting in her office feeling safe and protected, learning about Taehyun's sister and growing closer to him emotionally, dangerous men had been planning her kidnapping or murder. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Now you understand why my protection extends beyond employment benefits," Taehyun said, his tone returning to the cold efficiency she recognized from crisis situations, "and why some problems require permanent solutions." He moved to his desk and began making the same kind of urgent phone call she'd witnessed the night Derek died. As she listened to his rapid Korean commands, Jasmine realized that her new life had just become significantly more complicated and dangerous than she'd imagined. But she also realized that Kim Taehyun was the only thing standing between her and men who viewed her as an acceptable casualty in their quest for revenge. For the first time since accepting his offer, she understood that she didn't just want his protection. She needed it absolutely, and she was beginning to understand that needing Kim Taehyun might be the most dangerous position of all. The attack came 2 days later, coordinated and vicious in a way that proved Derek's associates were more dangerous than common street criminals. Jasmine was leaving the Kim Holdings building after another late evening when 3 men approached her in the underground parking garage. They moved with practiced efficiency, cutting off her escape routes and surrounding her before she could reach her car or the security cameras. "You're the reason Derek's dead," the leader said, a heavily muscled man with prison tattoos covering his forearms. "He was supposed to pay us back, but now he can't. So you get to pay his debt instead." Jasmine's training in survival kicked in immediately. She pressed the panic button on the phone Kim Taehyun had given her, the one connected directly to his personal security system. Then she focused on staying alive long enough for help to arrive. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, backing toward the concrete pillar that would at least protect her back from attack. "Sure you do, sweetheart. Derek told us all about his rich boyfriend who made him disappear. Figured we might want to meet this generous benefactor. But first, we're going to have some fun with his investment." The threat was clear and immediate. Jasmine felt terror claw at her throat, but alongside the fear came rage. She'd escaped Derek's violence only to face new predators who saw her as acceptable collateral damage in their quest for revenge. One of the men reached for her, and Jasmine surprised herself by fighting back with genuine ferocity. Months of good nutrition, professional fitness training, and the security that came from being truly protected had restored her physical strength and confidence. She wasn't the same broken woman who had cowered in a diner bathroom 6 months ago. But 3 against 1 was still impossible odds. They overwhelmed her quickly, efficiently, with the kind of coordinated violence that spoke of experience with kidnapping and worse. Just as zip ties bit into her wrists, the garage filled with the sound of approaching vehicles. Kim Taehyun arrived with a convoy that looked more like a military operation than a rescue. Black SUVs, armed men in tactical gear, and Taehyun himself emerging from the lead vehicle with cold fury radiating from every line of his body. His expensive suit looked incongruous against the background of organized violence, but his presence commanded immediate respect from everyone present. "Release her immediately," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its conversational volume. The men holding Jasmine clearly hadn't expected such an overwhelming response to what they'd assumed was a simple kidnapping. Their leader tried to maintain control of a situation that had obviously spiraled beyond his planning. "This is between us and her," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You don't want any part of this." Kim Taehyun's smile was the most terrifying thing Jasmine had ever witnessed. Cold, predatory, and completely without mercy. "You're mistaken," he said. "She belongs to me. Touching what's mine carries consequences you haven't considered." What followed was swift, professional, and more terrifying for its efficiency than any dramatic violence could have been. Taehyun's men moved with practiced coordination, and within minutes all three attackers were subdued and zip-tied in the same manner they'd intended for Jasmine. "Take them to the warehouse," Taehyun ordered in a tone that suggested their fate was already sealed. "Ensure they understand the price of threatening my property. Make certain their associates receive a clear message about future interactions." His men departed with their captives, leaving Taehyun and Jasmine alone in the garage. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken implications about what would happen to her attackers in the coming hours. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his attention focused entirely on her as he cut away the zip ties with a knife that appeared from somewhere within his suit jacket. Jasmine flexed her freed hands, checking for damage. "Scared, but not hurt. They didn't have time to do anything before you arrived." "Good." The alternative would have required more extensive consequences. The casual mention of consequences sent a chill through Jasmine, though she realized it was the same protective instinct that had saved her from Derek and now from his vengeful associates. Kim Taehyun's methods were brutal, but they were brutally effective at keeping her safe. "What will happen to them?" she asked as he escorted her to his car. "They will no longer be capable of threatening anyone," he replied with finality that closed off further questions. During the drive to his penthouse, Jasmine found herself processing not just the attack, but her own reaction to it. She should have been traumatized, horrified by the violence, desperate to escape from a world where kidnapping attempts were resolved with private armies and implied executions. Instead, she felt profoundly grateful and increasingly certain that Kim Taehyun was the only man capable of keeping her truly safe. At his penthouse, Taehyun poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey and offered her wine, which she accepted gratefully. They sat in his living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city sparkling below, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely shaken. "I should have anticipated this," he said, staring into his glass. "Derek's connections were more extensive than my intelligence suggested. I put you at risk through incomplete planning. You saved my life tonight," Jasmine said. "Again, I don't know how to thank you for that." Taehyun's dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You don't need to thank me. Protecting you isn't a favor I'm doing for you. It's something I need to do for myself." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications that shifted their relationship into territory neither had openly acknowledged before. "What do you mean?" she asked, though part of her already understood. "I mean that somewhere in the last 3 months, you stopped being an employee and became something much more important." Taehyun set down his glass and moved closer to where she sat on the leather sofa. "When I got the alert that you were in danger tonight, the fear I felt wasn't professional concern. It was terror at the thought of losing someone I've come to care about more than I intended." Jasmine felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but this time it wasn't from fear. "How much more?" she asked quietly. "Enough that I can't pretend this is just business anymore. Enough that I need you safe not just because I gave my word, but because losing you would destroy something in me I didn't know existed." The vulnerability in his confession was devastating in its honesty. This controlled, powerful man was admitting that she had become essential to him in ways that went far beyond their professional arrangement. "Taehyun," she said, reaching out to touch his hand. "I care about you too. More than I should. More than I planned." He turned his hand to capture hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both intimate and claiming. "This complicates everything," he said. "You were supposed to be under my protection, not in my heart." Maybe those aren't mutually exclusive, Jasmine replied. Maybe caring about someone is the best reason to protect them. Taehyun's control finally cracked. He pulled her closer, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness for someone capable of such decisive violence. You're mine, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not as an employee, not as someone under my protection, but mine in every way that matters. I need you to understand that. The possession in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat through her entire body and made her feel more desired than she'd ever imagined possible. I'm yours, she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. And you're mine, broken pieces and all. The kiss that followed was inevitable, desperate, and full of months of carefully controlled attraction, finally given permission to exist. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Taehyun rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything about our arrangement, he said. I know, Jasmine replied. I don't care. I want you, not just your protection. Then you'll have both, he said with the same certainty he brought to all his promises. Forever. In the aftermath of violence and confession, sitting in his arms while the city sparkled below them, Jasmine realized that she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not just safety from the dangers that had threatened her, but belonging with someone who saw her as precious enough to protect with lethal force and vulnerable enough to love without reservation. Kim Taehyun had saved her life multiple times, but tonight he'd given her something even more valuable, the knowledge that she was cherished completely by a man who had the power to keep that promise permanently. 6 months after the attack in the parking garage, Kim Taehyun had eliminated every remaining threat connected to Derek Morrison's criminal network. The warehouse meeting had yielded information about a broader organization involved in trafficking and extortion, and Taehyun's methodical dismantling of their operations had become something of a legend in the city's underworld. The message was clear: harm what belonged to Kim Taehyun and face complete annihilation. Jasmine no longer worked as his assistant. That professional relationship had evolved into something far more complex and intimate. She now managed several of his legitimate businesses, her intelligence and organizational skills proving invaluable in expanding his legal enterprises. The art gallery, the high-end restaurant chain, and the private security consulting firm all benefited from her attention to detail and natural business instincts. But more importantly, she had become the center of his personal world in ways that surprised them both. Taehyun, who had never imagined sharing his private space with anyone, found that coming home to Jasmine was the highlight of every day. She had transformed his sterile penthouse into something that felt like a home, with books scattered on tables, plants thriving near the windows, and the kind of comfortable domesticity he'd never thought he wanted. This morning was different, though. Taehyun had been planning this conversation for weeks, and his usual confidence was tempered by something approaching nervousness. Jasmine was reading financial reports in the breakfast nook, dressed in silk pajamas and looking more beautiful than any woman had a right to look while reviewing profit margins. Jasmine, he said, setting down his coffee cup with more care than necessary. She looked up, immediately sensing the gravity in his tone. What's wrong? Did something happen with the soul negotiations? Nothing's wrong, but I need to ask you something important. Taehyun moved to stand beside her chair, his dark eyes serious in a way that made her pulse quicken with anticipation rather than fear. Over these months, she'd learned to read his moods with precision born of intimacy and trust. Marry me, he said simply. Not because of our arrangement, not because you need protection, but because I love you and I want you to be my wife officially and permanently. The proposal was characteristically direct, without elaborate romance or dramatic gestures, but it carried the weight of absolute sincerity. Jasmine felt tears spring to her eyes as the full meaning of his words settled over her. Are you sure? She asked. Marriage to you means accepting your world completely. All of it. I'm certain. The question is whether you're ready to be Kim Jasmine officially, with everything that identity entails. The name change represented more than marriage. It meant full integration into his family structure, his business empire, his carefully constructed life of legitimate wealth built on a foundation of decisive violence, when necessary. Yes, she said without hesitation. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you. Taehyun's smile was radiant with genuine happiness, transforming his usually controlled features into something boyish and unguarded. He produced a ring box from his suit jacket, revealing a stunning diamond that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the marble breakfast bar. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "She would have loved you." Strong women who don't flinch from difficult realities were always her favorite kind of people. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her specifically. Jasmine admired how it looked on her hand, a tangible symbol of belonging to someone who valued her enough to share his most precious family heirlooms. "When?" she asked, already mentally cataloging the arrangements that would need to be made. "Next month. Private ceremony, immediate family and closest associates only. Dr. Park will handle the medical requirements, and my legal team will manage the documentation. You'll officially become part of the Kim family structure with all the protections and responsibilities that involves." The mention of family structure reminded Jasmine of how isolated her life had been before Taehyun. Working at the diner, avoiding Derek's violence, planning her escape. She'd had no meaningful connections, no one who would notice if she disappeared. "What about my family?" she asked. "My parents died when I was young, but I have cousins in California who try to stay in touch. They'll be located and contacted appropriately. Any family of yours becomes family of mine, with the protection and support that relationship provides." The thoroughness of his planning touched her deeply. Taehyun wasn't just proposing marriage. He was offering complete integration into a life where she would never again be vulnerable or alone. 2 weeks later, Jasmine stood in Taehyun's private office wearing a designer wedding dress that had been created specifically for her measurements and preferences. The ceremony was small but elegant, conducted by a judge who owed considerable favors to the Kim family and asked no questions about the speed of the arrangements. Taehyun looked magnificent in a black tuxedo that emphasized his sharp features and controlled power. When he spoke his vows, his voice carried the same certainty he brought to all his important promises. "I promise to protect you, provide for you, and love you for the rest of our lives," he said, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "You are my heart, my peace, and my purpose. What's mine is yours, and what threatens you dies permanently." The last line would have sounded threatening from anyone else. From Taehyun, it was simply the truth delivered with characteristic directness. Jasmine's own vows were equally honest. "I promise to stand beside you in all things, to trust your judgment, and to love you completely. You saved my life and gave me a future I never dared dream of. I choose you every day, forever." When the judge pronounced them married, the kiss they shared felt like both completion and beginning. Jasmine Chun had officially become Kim Jasmine, with all the power and protection that name represented. The reception was held in Taehyun's penthouse, transformed for the occasion with flowers, elegant catering, and carefully selected guests who represented both sides of his business empire. Jasmine met legitimate business people, respected community leaders, and individuals whose exact occupations remained diplomatically undefined. Everyone treated her with the respect due to Taehyun's chosen wife, but she could sense the deeper assessment happening. These people were evaluating whether she was worthy of their boss's devotion and protection, whether she understood the responsibilities of her new position. "Mrs. Kim," said Dr. Park, approaching with a warm smile and a glass of champagne. "How does it feel to officially join the family?" "Like coming home," Jasmine replied honestly. "I never understood what security felt like until I met your friend." "He chose well," Dr. Park said. "Taehyun needs someone strong enough to match him and wise enough to balance his protective instincts. You're perfect for each other." Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and they were alone in their transformed home, Taehyun and Jasmine sat together on the terrace overlooking the city. Her wedding dress had been replaced by silk pajamas, and his tuxedo exchanged for comfortable clothing, but the magnitude of the day still surrounded them. "Any regrets?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the lights sparkle below. "Only that it took us so long to get here," Jasmine replied. "I keep thinking about that night in the diner when you first noticed Derek's violence. If you hadn't intervened. But I did intervene. That's what matters now." Jasmine turned in his arms to look at him directly. "You know what I realized today during the ceremony? I spent 8 months planning to escape with $5,000 and no real plan beyond running away. Now I'm married to the most powerful man I've ever met, living in a penthouse that costs more than most people make in a lifetime, completely protected from every danger that once terrified me. The transformation has been remarkable, Taehyun agreed. You've exceeded every expectation I had when I first offered you employment. I love you, she said simply. Not your money, not your protection, not the security you provide. You, the man who remembers I like cream in my coffee and who told me about your sister because you trusted me with your pain. I love you too, he replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their city spread out below them like a kingdom they ruled together. Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her from a terrified waitress hiding money behind bathroom tiles to a woman wearing a platinum wedding band and bearing one of the most respected names in the city. Tomorrow they would begin their official life as husband and wife. Taehyun would continue expanding his empire, using both legal business acumen and extra-legal problem-solving to build security for their future. Jasmine would manage the legitimate operations while providing the emotional anchor that kept him connected to his humanity. But tonight, she was simply a woman who had found perfect love with a dangerous man who had proven that sometimes the only way to true safety was through someone willing to eliminate threats permanently. She was no longer running from anything. She was standing still, protected absolutely, loved completely, and planning a future that would be built on the unshakable foundation of Kim Taehyun's devotion. The scared waitress was gone forever, replaced by a woman who belonged exactly where she was, in the arms of a man powerful enough to keep his promises and gentle enough to cherish what he protected.